wind. Hi there. How do you do, Connor? My TV is telling me that only money will make me. Na, 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 na. Oh, that sounds very nice. I just ate far too much pizza from a bakery. It was delicious. Very thick and crusty, and best crust I've had here, I think. But I think I ate too much and feel tamasic, lethargic. But I also read a short story today and read a lot yesterday, and I feel a little bit of stuffed with ideas as well. Somebody asked me to talk about the relationship between the body and sexuality and spirituality and religion. And in his definition, he talked about religion as being something that I didn't really think of it as. I've always thought religion is a way to talk about the things that cannot be said so that you can share them with other people. All the things that cannot be talked about, the impossible things to talk about, codified into some dogma that everybody can be like, no, it was like this. This is what he said. This is what he did. This is the truth. And everybody can be on the same page, or imagine they are when they're really talking about things that are impossible to speak about with truth. And the unfortunate solution of most of those to overcome the body and the physical world as a way of somehow pleasing some impossible way of being. Francis sent a story to me today by E.M. Forster that it was obviously a blueprint for the Matrix and countless other sci-fi stories throughout history, but very bluntly was talking about the notion that humans have to overcome the physical world as a way of being somehow more human, and that conundrum. I was looking through a message that somebody sent me 3 years ago asking me to do a live video talk about the nexus of spirituality, sexuality, religion, and the body. And I don't know if I ever did it. I think that was probably when I started doing these, but not with any sort of regularity. And it's funny, since then I left New York City, where I was so habituated to constantly be in a sensual realm. Almost every person I interacted with was male, mostly naked. Sure, I walked around the city and biked around the city, but the majority of interactions were based on sex, to go meet someone for sex, or to give someone a massage, which is not sex, but is something very like sex. Even it has nothing to do with orgasm or ejaculation. It's this, the body being recognized by another human. And made real. I once had a definition of love, I think when I was 18, that there were like 3 kinds of loves. There was the love of the physical, and the love of the mental, and then an existential love. Just somebody who like really made you feel like you actually existed, like your viewpoints were real, you weren't just some insane, lonely, floating, chaotic atom. It seemed very airtight to me at the time. And I certainly developed my capacities for loving over the years. Physical, existential, and intellectual. Those friends you have to talk to for hours and hours and hours and hours and be completely understood by, arguing over the nuances of comprehension. I think that's the same thing as religion a lot of the time, but it depends on if you're trying to speak of things only in the material realm, like real estate or circuitry or mechanics, economics, or if you're trying to speak about, well, I guess you can talk about philosophical things that aren't necessarily spiritual, the motivations, the intentions, the constructs of society and mentality. But I was really, really, really obsessed with why are we here? What the fuck are we doing here? How long do we have to be here? What is it we have to achieve? Why are we in this situation? I was very confused by the whole thing and frankly just wanted it over as quickly as possible. But that was before I really got interested in sex. Sex was such a good distraction. And I remember a young part of me that had a disdain for materialism, had a disdain for masculinity of fat men and muscular men and hairy men. There was a time in my late teenage years that I just wanted to be a dandy. I wanted to have a clean-shaven face and wear pinstripe suits and figure out how to use all the right silverware and fabrics and wines. I liked this effete idea of existence and had great disdain for the coarseness, which of course I then flipped into glorifying in a way like Jean Genet or something. Absurd, extreme. But when I came back to feeling like there was some world behind the world that I could somehow access, I wrestled with that for many, many years, and turned to it in times of desperation, suffering, confusion, beyond what I felt like I could endure. Unfortunately, the story I was raised in never worked for me. Catholicism, my namesake. And religion itself has always been distasteful to me. Although I feel like, had meetings with gods, Abrahamic gods and their avatars, and Hindu gods, and pagan gods of various relationships with the earth, various cultures from the old Europe. And I guess gods that I don't even know the name of. I've never been a fan of worshiping gods, except in the form of man, I suppose, when I've been obsessed sexually with the idea of worshiping the form of man. And I remember, I was introduced to yoga at the age of 18, but I wasn't introduced to bhakti, which is a path to enlightenment through the worship of a god, usually in the form of singing, but also washing someone's feet, giving offerings, offering oneself in service, devotion. It's still never been my channel. I'm not someone who's into gurus very much. But sex for me has always had this component behind the physical, even though the men that I've worshipped and gone completely insanely crazy over the years have been incredibly meaty. Thick, fat, stinky, hairy, muscular, heavy, gross. Like you and you and you. And it's like worshipping Thor or Hades, Vulcan. Any of the Greeks, I suppose, they were all pretty large. And the Titans. But to make it something, like early in my sexual experiences, I was 20. I got a job working at a gay bathhouse in Portland, Oregon. And the guy that was the manager who gave me the job, we had the same taste in men. He was this big, round, gigantic bear with a big beard. And so he knew the men that would be interested in me and the men who wanted him. And so very often while I was working behind the desk, taking money, selling rooms, going upstairs to clean the rooms, change the sheets, etc., he would stop me and he'd say like, "Oh, Dominic, this one is for you. Hey, go upstairs and have fun. I'll watch the desk for you." It wasn't an obligation. It wasn't something I had to do. It was this gift, this freedom. And it was really like that break in my life from having, every time I'd had sex with somebody, I'd completely fallen in love with them, to having sex with like 4 or 5 people a day. Every day. But I very quickly learned that if I had sex with somebody without loving them, it felt really bad. It made me feel really bad. And you know, about the conversation yesterday, love, it's a confusing topic, but I had to somehow connect the sexual energy with my heart and give it back to them, usually with the simple phrase of "I love you" or some kind of incredibly passionate feeling of devotion. Hello, my love. And very quickly within that experience, there was this experience where this construction worker guy, again, the manager, he's like, "Oh, that one's for you." And this construction worker, like cliche, like talking in a thick, monosyllabic kind of way, as if each word coming out of his mouth was a surprise slash, you know, just some kind of half-formed utterance. He said, "Oh, I want you to drain me, you know, I want you to just completely drain me." And I was like, "Completely?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just want you to take it all." And I was like, "Okay." Hello, my love. And I had a very clear perception that when he was coming near orgasm, I was sucking his dick. When he was coming near orgasm, I was able to feel a course of energy through my body, through my heart, through my genitals, my belly, all the way through my mouth, through up into his body. And it was almost like I could feel his soul. You know, the idea of the soul is tricky, but I really wanted to understand at this age, like what the soul was, what the limits of it were, what could be done with it. I didn't yet really believe in reincarnation. I was just in a state of confusion, question, and mystery. But I remember, you know, he said he wanted to be drained. He wanted me to take all of it, right? So when he was getting near orgasm, there was this, you know, how do you walk? How do you move your arms? It's this thing your body knows how to do. You know, there's not a part of my brain telling me to move my arms. It's just happening. And it was like that, some instinctual movement that I reached up and grabbed his whole essence and pulled it down through him as he was orgasming into my mouth. Feeling like I had achieved getting all of it, the man collapsed and fell over and passed out on the bed. And this did two things for me. It made me realize that when people say things like that, they probably don't mean what they're saying. And it also let me know that if somebody gave me permission to do something like that, I had the ability to do it. And if I had the ability to do it, it was something that could be harnessed and refined, like yoga or meditation or craftsmanship, right? And indeed, the reason I wanted to be a slut when I was younger was the idea, I had a very clear image in my mind that I would meet the man of my dreams, the husband, the mentor, the something, and I would have to know how to please him in every way possible. It's a very old kind of courtesan concept that later on, when I did start believing in past lives and realized I had been a courtesan a million times, I was like, well, obviously, you know, this idea of being able to perfectly please the man, perfectly please the lover, is a skill I have honed many times. But again, it wasn't just on a physical level. And through those early years of sex for me, if I went to a cruising park, I remember a plumpy friend of mine who took me to the windmills in Golden Gate Park in his car. And we walked around not having sex with each other, but having sex with all sorts of other men. And there was one period that I was sucking someone's dick, and then somebody else stood behind him, and then a whole line formed. And I was really blown away that a whole line of people formed while I was sucking someone's dick. And when he came, the next man would come, and then when he came, the next man would come. A few months later, this happened again to me in the first sex party I went to in New York. Bruin Buddies. And it was like 10 people lined up. And I'd say that with each of them, I had that same kind of connection that I described earlier. This type of connecting with some energetic body that I believed they had inside of their physical body, at the same time worshiping their physical body and connecting my whole inner energetic and physical body with their inner energetic and physical body. That's what the perception was. That's what the feeling was like. And years later, when I was not so enamored by the attention I was getting, I pulled a dick out of my mouth when a line was forming, because there was some guy who was standing there watching, jerking off after like 3 guys I had sucked off, and then there was a line forming. And I turned to him and I said, hey, I'll get back to you in a second. You see all these people lining up? And he said, yeah. And I was like, and you're standing here watching. Can you tell me why these people are lining up? And he said, yes. I said, what? And he said, most people, when they suck cock, they're doing it for themselves. They're trying to like get the guy off. And you can see that they're just trying to take his energy, but you are giving 150% of your attention to this person. You're completely absorbing into them. And it somehow like transforms. I thought of the words he said, and I was just like, that's visible from the outside. And he said, yes. And I said, great, that's what I'm doing. I'm glad it's visible from the outside. And I've taught a couple blowjob workshops over the years. That's something that I kind of imagine I'm going to be doing in this next chapter of my life as a teacher, teaching blowjob workshops. That's something that I could do on Facebook Live, again, in a descriptive way, but none of you could practice at the same time unless you're living with a partner. And even then, that might be difficult if you've been together too long and no longer have a sexual passion. But there is a difference between trying to get somebody off and take something from them as opposed to serving them. and giving them all of your energy. When I started studying Taoist sex practices like the multi-orgasmic man, there's one of the things he talks about is where you can take the orgasmic energy and pull it up through your system and cycle it through this channel that resonates with all of the organs and all of the meridians, and it can amplify the orgasm, right? So I thought, I can do this to myself when I'm masturbating. None of these guys, these meat men these meatballs that I love so much, give a shit about these kind of practices. They just want their cock sucked. They just want to feel good. There was an Italian guy that I had sex with in Brooklyn Heights for fucking years. And I stopped having sex. But man, he was fucking mind-blowing to me. He's a Taurus. His birthday's right around now. Hi. I found this guy so fucking hot. And I don't know why. But he made it clear to me early on in our sexual relationship that he wanted me to suck all of the life out of him. I really got the clear message that he really wished he could die having an orgasm in my mouth. There was a huge, like for a lot of us, sex and death are really intertwined. Obviously the French have la petite mort, the little death is the orgasm. When this whole pandemic shit started, the sex beach down here went fucking crazy with guys having sex. You know, the death urge gets turned on and everybody's like, ah! A guy that I know in Pittsburgh, or near Pittsburgh, that I just talked to a few days ago and hadn't talked to for months, he's been having boys come out to his house to have sex with him all week, and he's this big fat daddy bear, and I'm just like, dude. But I'm not gonna say anything. I'm like, sure, all these boys are horny and you're having them out there to fuck them, that's great. But that's not social distancing, so I guess, you know, whatever, it's cool. Death and sex are super, super, super combined. And this guy that I was having sex with, it really unnerved me that he really had such a strong death urge in the sex we were having. And there were a few times, like we'd get really stoned and I would try it. I'd be like, is that possible? I remember reading in a book. I'm not losing track of the thread, don't worry. I remember reading in a book, I don't remember which book it was now, that there was some Arabic practice that involved having sex with someone and at the moment they orgasm, slitting their throat. Because that made the orgasm the most exquisite sensation that a man could have. And years later, when I was living in Amsterdam and sucking off a lot of Turkish dudes in the Oosterpark, Moroccan dudes, sorry, not Turkish, Moroccan dudes in the Oosterpark, God, I remember sucking this guy's dick and he uncovered his penis with no other skin accessible. And I lifted up his shirt so I could rub his nice round belly, and he quivered uncontrollably like his body had never been touched except for his penis. It was amazing. But somebody told me, like, oh, you have to be careful having sex in that park because Moroccans like to slit the throat of the guys who suck in their dick. And I'm like, really? I thought that was just something I read in a story. Sex and death. I tried with this Italian dude in Brooklyn Heights when I was really stoned. I didn't succeed, but I made him pass out many times. I'm sure it would be possible if both lovers were conscious and one of them had this idea of, I'm going to release all attachment to ego and body and give you the rest of this vital life essence and leave this husk empty. I wrote a whole sex story about this once that I've never published anywhere, about these sex rituals of compressing life essence and then passing it from one body to another. It's kind of inspired by William Burroughs' Wild Boys, but he always had this idea about like really young boys capturing each other's essence or something. Mine was this different form of immortality. Maybe his was too. But the point I'm getting at is there's a impulse beyond procreation that all of us have, gay or straight. And the clear thing about gay people is that they know they can't procreate. When I was a kid, there was this whole religious movement about how recreational sex was wrong and procreational sex was the only sex that was sanctioned by God or something. And I remember this is very much what my mind did at that time. I said, well, what is recreational sex, right? If you just change the emphasis, it could be recreational sex. And maybe what gay men are doing when they have sex is connecting into each other's energetic body, electrical, chemical, passionate, resonant sound, pheromonal, like this whole multi-dimensional connection. And with their orgasms, they're recreating each other. And this has come up again, I had this idea. I was raised in the shadow of AIDS, right? I was born in 1978 and came to sexual maturity in like 1990 when people were still dying all the time of AIDS in America. People are still dying all the time of AIDS, but not in America, not in the same way. And I had this idea that AIDS, that viruses were created by the body. I read an article recently that likened viruses not to a living being, but to a seed. And if you were to talk about a tree or a flower, would you say its seeds are alive? No, they're not alive, but they can exist for hundreds of years, as they have found with amaranth and quinoa in ancient burial sites. They can exist for hundreds of years and still be viable without living in any way, just waiting. Viruses, I don't know if they can exist for hundreds of years, but some can crystallize and exist for a very long time. And then when they meet a fleshy host, will suddenly flourish and grow. I had never read anything that had compared a virus to a seed before. But they still don't know where viruses came from. Where did the first virus come from? So with this metaphor, I had this idea that viruses were created by the psyche, created by the body. They were rogue, energetic feelings and thoughts and stories that the body wanted to tell biologically, not verbally, not action-based, but just biologically. And I believe that the viruses we knew about, and again, I was very interested in science when I was younger. I believe the viruses we knew about were the viruses that caused problems. We didn't know about the viruses that helped us. I didn't know if there were such things at that time, but I remember a few years ago when I read that they had mapped the whole human genome. They had completed the project. It didn't answer the questions, but they were shocked to find that the human genome was riddled with ancient viruses. And I thought, how can you distinguish a virus DNA, virus in our DNA code, from human DNA? What does that mean? And what would happen if we painstakingly removed all of the viral DNA? Would that return us to the Aryan Prometheus? What would that do? Would that make us completely unable to exist in this physical realm because everything would kill us immediately, or we wouldn't be compatible with it? The definition of what a virus is. So I had this fantasy that AIDS was created from the generations of men who were told that God hated them and their parents hated them and they should hate themselves because of their desires. Their desires turned into action. Their action was a spiritual, physical ritual whereby their passions united in orgasm, grunting, sweat, DNA, sugar, protein, and recreated each other. And that somewhere in those orgasmic moments of transcendence, they created this for themselves, this fitting punishment for what they truly believed about themselves, that they were really, really, really trying to get away from, but they needed shitloads of drugs and alcohol and discos and so, that there was some joy in, but mostly escapism from their self-hatred and self-loathing. So in the early in my early sexual life, when I started to be a slut and having lots of sex, I was like, how can I engage with that same impulse, that same orgasmic coupling with a person and create a good virus? A virus that, when it infects someone, makes them feel like they love themselves and that they're completely confident and that they belong and that they are powerful and beautiful and they can pass it on to other people. And so literally, when I would fuck people and come inside of them, I would think, you're beautiful, you're sacred, you're holy, you're powerful, you're gorgeous, you're creative. I would try to think all of these things as I was coming. I would try to think these things as I was having sex with them, and then when I was coming, and then after I was coming. But usually I'd never talk to these people about this. And that's what I was saying earlier about the guy who had the death wish. That when I was studying the microcosmic orbit and this way of multiplying orgasms, I got back to having sex with him. And I'd stopped for a while because the last time I had sex with him, I walked in and he snorted some coke, he smoked some weed, he was drinking whiskey, and then smoked some crack. And this is a 70-year-old fucking lawyer, right? I'm like, what the fuck? And he had porn on and disco music at the same time. It was total sensory overload, and I was like, dude, so I'm just like crack to you? I'm just crack? That's what this is? I come over and I'm crack? You know, and at this point I'd had a relationship with him for 10 years, and I was like, this is all this is? Fuck this shit. But when I started having sex with him again, after I had developed this Taoist sex practice, I just, you know, again, this man has no interest in etheric realms, no interest in spiritual manipulation. He's a Taurus, he's very ignorant. And I grabbed his orgasm when he came. I grabbed the essence of it, and instead of taking it into me as I so often did, I pushed it back into him and cycled it through his channels with all the visualization of all the studying I had done and the visceral sensation, because I'm so good at this point, of connecting my internal sensual reality with somebody else's. And I gave him an orgasm for over a half hour. He just sat in his chair going, ah, 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 ah. Like, it was amazing. I was like, holy shit, I can just keep this going and going. And he never told me to stop because I knew how to temper it so it was never too much. It was just this amazing rhythmic orgasm. The first lover that I lived with, I was 21 and he was 34. And the first time I was with him for like 25 hours, and I was fucking him for like 15 of those hours. And then when we lived together, we had sex for 4 or 5 hours every day. It's a story many of you have heard me tell, and I'm not exaggerating. We were only together for 3 months. But we would both ejaculate pretty quickly and then just ride these levels of orgasm to the point that we were hallucinating. There were like tunnels of light around us, and we were laughing and crying, and there were like landscapes unrolling behind him, and he had done a lot of psychic work and talked to fairies and shit like I was like, oh, this guy is like the wizard of my dreams. It ruined me for years. Anytime I tried to have sex with anybody else, it was just like, oh, that was lame. I mean, it was just on this physical level. But he was a half Native American, and a few years later I met this cool Native American chief guy who I had sex with for a while. And I had, like, sex with him was whatever the physical action was. There was some fucking going on. But there was one time that I turned into, like, a rabbit, and he was like a bird of prey, like an eagle, and he picked me up and carried me through the air to, like, another realm, where he then ate me and we transformed into a being together. And it was just like... That's the sex I've always striven for, right? But when we get into the ancient practices of Tantra and the Taoist sex practices, this is something that they were engaging with for thousands of years, writing codexes, studying, finding people they could hone their magic with. And the stories from the ancient Taoist texts are, you know, horrific. There was this, one of the early ones I read was this famous Taoist master who was a female, who would take the young boys of the village and suck all the life force out of them with her vagina. You know, classic story. But this is like a story that's told over and over and over again. So that, because Taoism was all about achieving immortality, so she could just drain these youthful bodies and stay alive, an empress. But apart from these sick stories, these unhealthy black magic stories, there are... Taoism is a very different bent than Hinduism, but Taoism has these ideas that, like, let's say you have cancer. Let's say your lover has cancer. Put us in the driver's seat. Let's say your lover has cancer, and you learn these practices of harnessing sexual energy and transforming it into healing energy. There's infinite ways that can be done. What healing means, what the energy means, what the problem is. And let's say the practice, I mean, some of these codexes have practices where you have to fuck in a very specific way of like 8 shallow thrusts and then 1 deep one. And while you're doing it, you're harnessing energy from the sky and from the earth, cycling it through your channels, milking positive energies out of your organs and pumping it into their area of problem. So if they have osteoporosis, you're pushing it into their bones to make their bones stronger. If they have cancer, you're pushing it into that organ to push out all of the negative energies. And the prescriptions would be something like fucking for 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day. They would have like, you know, perform 760 thrusts or something. Like, so that as a spiritual practice is taking the physical passion and elevating it from that's hot as fuck, which there's nothing wrong with, to maintaining the passion whilst having an incredible sense of discipline, concentration, visualization, imagination, staying very present in the body, staying very present in the mind and the heart, and all these other organs and energy pathways. When I talk about, you know, the way I suck cock or the way I fuck somebody, the kind of visualizations I have, like, to a lot of people that doesn't sound sexy. But similarly, when I first encountered sex magic as a teenager, they had these ideas of like writing out a sentence of your intention and then turning it into a sigil by combining all the letters into one letter shape, into one shape, and then projecting it onto an image of eroticism. So whatever your idea of the sexiest thing was, like drawing it on it, and then masturbating to this image with the sigil on it while holding in mind the idea that you were going to, with your sexual energy, harness the energy in the ether around you to bring it down into your testicles and penis and ejaculate it into the world so it will manifest as a real thing. A job, a new car, a solution to the mathematical equation you're stuck on, the engineering, the poetry, the music. Anything's possible with this essence of creation. On the other hand, you have Tantra, which is not Neo-Tantra, which is not Gay Tantra, which is not Tantra what most people think of as Tantra. But Tantra, whereas you look at the whole nature of sexuality and get into what makes sex attractive, which is the idea that someone else has what you want. A hot ass, balls full of cum, big tits, nice thighs, whatever the fuck your thing is, whatever you want from somebody, whatever turns you on. You imagine that what that is, what somebody has, that's a manifestation of God, which is in itself a manifestation of the Overlord, which is in itself a manifestation of all of creation, which is in and of itself undifferentiated everything right now and here, and that this is all just an illusion. You take the lust, you can perform Tantra with ice cream and cake. You take the desire, and the sweetness of the icing is the ejaculation of Lord Ganesha, which is the blood in the veins of Shiva, which is the DNA in the chromosomes of Brahman. So you try to delve into that which fortifies the illusion of separation, the illusion of existence. Again, most people can't get on board with this because they're like, what are you talking about? This is really happening. This is all real. We're all stuck in this pandemic. Yes, it's a very persistent illusion. And the thing that I always reduce this to is just like the cells on your skin may think they're having a very important individual experience. To you, they're completely not important except that they are your skin. And you love your skin, but you don't know one cell from another. That we're all cells in the body of God. Every planet is cells in the body of God. Which gets back to, what would sex be in Christianity if there was a sexual practice? And of course there is. Of course there is eat of my body and drink of my blood. Of course there is the Passion of Christ. Of course there is countless nuns and monks in monasteries hallucinating Jesus coming to them as their lover, this naked man with his long hair and his big beard, masculine, even though he might be skinny, and, you know, making love to them like by opening his chest and enveloping them in his transcendent compassion. Countless cloistered monks having sex with each other over the years, enacting either through Hermetic, Gnostic ritual or just plain perverted derivations of a regular Catholic Mass. It's coming in each other's mouths. There's this beautiful story a friend told me of these holy men in Indonesia that I was feeling completely lethargic at the beginning of this. There's this beautiful story about these holy men in Indonesia that are holy and are hired by people to come in and heal and transform the land as trans comedians. They're men who dress as women to come into spaces and do comedy shows. And they're believed to harness the magic to transform the negative energy in grave sites, war zones, witness areas of terrorist bombings, etc., plagues, the death of a loved one, a baby who was born dead, and the mother died, horrible things that happen. They can transform the energy by making everybody laugh. And they're believed to have this power because they never ejaculate in a woman. They never create another living being, and they never ejaculate out in the air. They only ejaculate inside of each other. This is the folklore of that region. That because these men come in each other's asses and mouths, they retain a special magic that most heterosexual people just don't have. And they're men who dress up as women and go into these spaces and perform comedy shows. And it's a sacred, cultural, spiritual, ritualistic thing that is connected to the sexuality. I long have believed, from stories I've read from various sources that I've cobbled together in synthesis, that in so many cultures in ancient Europe that had become Christian, and even before that, there were basically societal taboos about being a bachelor, about being a spinster. Like, it was seen as a terrible betrayal of society if you did not get married and have children. And so the majority of homosexual people would get married and have children and then ignore their spouses and have sex with their friends all the time. And that, you know, still goes on today and has happened forever. But there came a place in society where people could go and stand up with dignity in front of society and say, I will not have children. I will never lay with a woman. And that was called the priesthood, right? One of my friends who was a celibate monk, one of my greatest lovers for 15 years, he told me that the actual biblical definition of celibacy was not laying with a woman, was not engendering children. It wasn't about not having sex. Specifically was not about not having sex, specifically was about not being with a woman. relating to men, of course. And so if you look at the history of sexuality, like so many ancient cultures were all about older men having sex with younger men as a way of indoctrinating them into the culture. So when we look at Catholicism and we ridicule all the fucking terrible pederasty that's been going on because of the perversion and the abuse and the exploitation and the abuse of power, it comes from hundreds of years of this being the normal practice that was never put into words. Something people did but didn't speak of. And it was a way, it was exactly what the fucking Republican people are afraid of when they say that like homosexuals are having sex with young people to indoctrinate them and to convert them into homosexuals. It was about bringing them into a culture, into a way of being that wasn't just taking them to school and showing them shit in a book, but breeding it into their bodies as a sacred, because they ritualized, they were a fucking ritual pageant. That's what they were doing. Everything about them, the ringing bells and the costumes and the host and the blah, 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 blah. They were making, like, the sex was a ritual act. I have a Hasidic Jewish friend. Oh my God, I'm just totally going off. I have a Hasidic Jewish friend who told me that a very important part of their teaching is that you never spill your seed, right? That's a classic Abrahamic religion thing. You never spill your seed. And as a boy in yeshiva, he and his friends would climb up into the attic where they thought they were secretly relieving each other's ejaculate congestion, you know? He said they would rub each other like this without lubrication, like starting a fire, until they ejaculated. He said their penises all had sores all over them because they didn't use lube and they were giving each other skin burns all the time. It doesn't sound very sexy. But one of his teachers pulled him aside one day after everybody else left the classroom and said, "I know what you're doing up in the attic and you know it's a sin." And he said, "Yes, I know it's a sin." And he was like, "But I can show you what you can do to not make it a sin." He's like, "What's that?" He's like, "You have to plant your seed." And rolls on his back and has this guy that I know fuck him as like a 13 or 14-year-old. And the teacher's like in his 20s. Religion and sexuality have always been intertwined. There's always been a impulse in our sexual passion to want more than a good time. When gay men use the phrase like, "Oh, I want to get together and play," like that was totally fun for me for a long time. The idea that like we're just kids, we're just playing, we're just exploring. But as I matured a little bit, I was like, okay, when do we get to graduate from kindergarten and move on from playing and get into like the ritual and get in, because this is just what I expected. I thought homosexuals like were this intellectual elite race of humans that were like sex wizards. Lo and behold, they're mostly just materialists without kids that have double incomes that spend a lot of money on houses and jobs and dogs. And endless paintings of young men with six-pack abs and marble statues. That's cool. But I have so yearned for there to be a gay sex wizard school. One of my friends, a straight guy who I think is totally gay, but he's straight. I think he's in his 50s and he's a virgin, I think. He won't answer that question. But he has never had a girlfriend, and he's the sort that strikes me that he wouldn't have sex if he didn't. He was telling me about a friend of his who was in love, and he said, "Oh, well, he's in love, he's got a boyfriend." And I was like, "Oh, he has a boyfriend." And I've known this guy for years, and I'm like, yeah. He's had a lot of boyfriends over the years. He's really in love with them for a few months. I was like, "Is he living with this boyfriend?" And he's like, no, the boyfriend's in California. They just met on the internet a few months ago, and they're really in love. I'm like, "Oh, that's not a boyfriend, that's a video game." And he was like, "What?" And I explained to him this thing that not just homosexuals do, but that homosexuals do, and certainly straight people, where they meet somebody online and they fall in love with them and they maintain this incredibly passionate relationship totally based in fantasy. And then when they meet, they're like, "We have nothing in common. Oh, well, how disappointing," and they cry. Or what's worse, some other guy that I only know on Facebook who posts endless pictures of himself. He has beautiful eyes and he's a sexy fat bear. Very sexy fat bear, too much. he recently posted about how he had met this guy in California and he fell in love with them, and so he went to live with them and they got married. Like, they chatted online for months, and then he went to California and got married with them without ever having spent any real time with them. Went to California, got married to him, and decided to live with them, and then suddenly found out that he was a meth addict and was having sex with all these other people that were meth addicts and doing coke and just like drunk all the time, and he was horrified. He said it was like the worst hell that he had ever been in for 3 months until he fled back to Europe and got the marriage annulled. So I was like, yeah, that's not a boyfriend, that's not being in love, that's a video game. And it's a good thing to do in times like this when we're all panicking about the future, to imagine that there's a future of love and hope. And I don't want to come across as some kind of jaded old queen. I mean, certainly I believe in love, but in a completely different like paradigm. And then he got me started on this whole rant about the gay story, because I was like, this is what gays do, blah, 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 blah. I want gays to be able to tell this story of material, spiritual, intertwining transcendence, transfiguration. And he said, well, what stories do they tell? And I'm like, they just endlessly tell stories of the tragedy of their life. That, like, the gay story told in movies ad nauseum is that they just, all life has to end in tragedy and suicide and death, AIDS, and, you know, something like, and then there's always some closet case situation. And he said, well, what story do you want told? And I tried to articulate this for him, the idea of grabbing the essence of spirituality and, you know, starting it off with an open, this is a perverted sex cult that we're trying to elevate into transforming the world. At the crux of the disappointment that I've had with sex and love over the years is that I've always looked for a partner that we can unify and like edit each other's DNA and then transform the whole world with orgasmic moans and grunts. I mean, like, my desires are way above the offering, the entry offering when you become a human. Just like, yeah, you could get a really nice house in the suburbs and a job that gives you 3-digit salaries in the year, and you could have 2 cars, maybe a nice house in the country, maybe on a lake. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to fucking transform reality to orgasms. Good luck with that. But I still feel that that's not a unique passion of mine. It's one of my friends who's a wizard. When I first met him, he said, Dominic, I think that you are a specific being put on this planet to fuck all of life, you know, with love and passion or something. He's like, you're a gigantic phallus going around needing to fuck everything in existence. And when I first started being a spiritual, sexual being, so many people were calling me Pan that, unbeknownst to me, I was just willingly manifesting as a vessel for Pan and getting totally ridden and used out by him, causing everybody around me to burst into orgy and like fucking somebody in the boiler room and then fucking other people around. You know, it was very like, you can do such things. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it is all happening. I just have always wanted to be able to take it into a level of consciousness that, again, the Taoists and the Hindus talk about in their sexual practices, that you imagine that you can go into these levels of like clarity, strength, concentration. You know, like, how did beings evolve? How are humans going to evolve when we're stopping natural selection? Well, evolution itself will evolve. I love the idea that we're going to figure out how to couple and transform our DNA with our sexual passion, with harnessing will, imagination, dream. That's what I want. So anybody who's watching this who wants to start a sex cult commune with me, where we're practicing this every day, honing and refining the sexual energy and concentration, attenuating the passion, the drive, the lust, the joy, the smell, It's a very nice thing about being in a place that's really fucking hot all the time. It's just like I'm really like stinky in a way that I like. It's unfortunate there's no one here to enjoy it. I look at my forearms, which have turned kind of burnt blonde from all the sun, and I'm just like, man, I wish someone were here to enjoy this. And I mean, it's like when I was in Sicily a couple of years ago and I was harvesting oregano from the fields in Sicily and then taking it back to the shed and drying it and then spending the next few days threshing it over a screen so the air was filling with oregano dust and all of my body was sweaty and covered with oregano dust. And I was like, this would taste delicious if only there were a man here who could appreciate it, who could like love my body for what it is and all the flavors and all the smells mixed with like the sweat and the sun of Sicily and Sicilian oregano. Oh my God. Well, quality over quantity, Joseph, but you still need someone who's willing to do the work. The play, the work, the concentration, I licked as much of my skin as I could. I licked as much of my skin as I could. And it's taken me like 6 or 7 years to really start to get a grip on controlling my own sexual energy. Meaning that if I can't have sex, and I don't just want to spend 6 hours a day masturbating, to be able to pull it up and transform it into other energy. I was first introduced to the concept like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's only in the last year, I guess probably since being in Thailand and being around Montauk Chia, that's one of the things they say is that when you're with a master who knows how to do it, they can kind of transmit it to you. Yes, Joseph, yes. That's what I've done for years though, is that if I'm having sex with somebody and they're like, that's hot. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's hot, but you know, I can take our orgasm and I can transform it and do something with it. But their response is still like, wow, that was amazing. I haven't had sex like that since I was in my 20s. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's awesome to give somebody an amazing sexual experience, but eventually you're like, okay, I'm doing this myself. You know, you want someone who can challenge you. You want someone who can, you can wrestle to the top. You can learn something from and succeed each other. You know, if you want something right, you do it yourself, but nothing can compare with multiple people giving input to the thing. I guess it's the concept of a writer's room or a partnership. Maybe it's everyone's little secret. Maybe this is what all gay men actually want. I do know that for years, like on hookup sites, people will say like, oh, I want to get fucked, you know, I'll be like face down, ass up, blindfolded, come into my room and breed me. When what they really want is someone to like hug them and kiss them and just love them. Yeah, the quest for the equal exchange. This is really live Dominic Fine, yeah. I think so. I think so. But that everybody, you know, there are lots of people out there that are like, I don't want to kiss, I don't want to cuddle, I don't want anything mutual, I just want you to suck me off, or I just want you to come in my mouth, or whatever. That's somehow easier to ask for than I want someone to cuddle with me and spoon me, than I want someone to lay next to me so I can feel their heart beating. And I've said this to people for years, and they're all like agree with me. They're like, yeah, that's what I actually want, but I can't ask for it. And in just recent years, that's what I've started putting in all my profiles, which I've always tried to be radically honest to, you know, to the excessive fault in all of my profiles. I can't say it has made it happen. Thanks, Paul. But yeah. It's beautiful that there are statues, thank you, Michael, that there are statues. Hey, if anybody of you guys want to give me money, there's a donation link. If you're still making money and you want to give me some, there's a donation link. Please do it. I don't know where I'm pointing. You don't have to. I'm just, somebody's like, this is amazing. I'm suddenly getting accolades. So I'm just reminding you, if you find this worthwhile and you still have an income, share. But yeah, it's amazing that within spirituality, there are many sexual images, and yet most religions vilify sexuality. And I think it's because it's so easy for people to get lost in sexuality. A metaphor that I used with somebody who was asking me about sexual practices last year in Laos, a straight guy, was I was like, the problem with sexual passion is like if you're giving a massage to somebody, and if you open up to the sexual energy, you can heal them so much more than if you don't. If you deny it or keep it suppressed, you cannot engage with the wholeness of their body as well as you can as if you connect with their sexual energy. However, the danger of connecting with someone's sexual energy is that it's fire. It's a very special fire, and you are very combustible when it comes to sexual energy. So if you get close to sexual energy and you're not really super grounded and really like intent on what you're doing as a healer, then you're just gonna burst into flames and fuck them or get fucked by them. And again, there's nothing wrong by that, but that's not the same kind of healing. You can engage with the sexual energy and fuck and make it about healing. But if your baser desires of being a vampire come up, or you're just like, oh my God, I want his cum, or oh, I just need to fuck that ass, whatever your version of that is, of using someone as an object, then when you objectify someone, you lose, well, not necessarily. I was gonna say you lose the magic. I suppose, like any scene, you can set it up where somebody is an object and make it a ritual. Certainly people can embody themselves as objects and be powerful objects. I don't have the answer, but I have the stories. I need to write a book on this. I need to join a sex commune so we can practice and talk about and dream about and practice and ritualize and cool down and restrain and explode and ablaze with fire. Like countless men before us. Joseph, there was a girl I met the first time I went to Italy. Actually, I met her in California and she invited me to this commune in Italy. And when I got there, she tried to have sex with me, which I thought was pretty funny. She got my dick hard and she was holding it in her hands and she was about to put it in her mouth. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, don't you want it?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "What do you mean no? Your dick's hard." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're playing with it and I'm 25. So what the fuck do you expect? You're 24. And she's like, "But all men want their dick sucked." And I'm like, "I don't. And I don't by a beautiful blonde-haired girl." And she's like, "I don't understand that." And I said, "Why are you so horny?" And she's like, "Just because I'm really horny." And she told stories about this wonderful story about the 60-year-old man. She's like, "You can't have sex with 60-year-old men." And I'm like, "Oh yes, you can." I won't launch into that story, it's very funny. But the point of her was she had a Moroccan boyfriend at the time. And he would only have sex with her once every 2 weeks. And it drove her fucking crazy. And he said that the reason he would only have sex with her once every 2 weeks was that he only wanted to have sex with her when it was amazing. And so like you're saying, Joseph, yes, quality over quantity. If you have actual intimacy with a partner that's not based on sex, but you actually can have good sex, that's fucking amazing. And if you can connect like the tube of unification through sexuality to your heart and out into the cosmos, it alleviates all of the sexual tension. I do believe that you can be completely physically happy with somebody without having sex, and without feeling stifled or neglected. If you actually have physical intimacy and connection, the energy does not need to be expressed sexually. It doesn't need to be expressed orgasmically, and orgasms can happen in tiny ways, thousands of times a day, without it having to result in ejaculation or have anything to do with your dick. So if you love somebody and you turn across the room and you see him like drawing or reading a fucking book, and you're just like, I love him so much, and you feel it for about 5 seconds and it just ripples through your body, then that's an orgasm. It's certainly worth loving and appreciating. Who wants to join my cult? So yeah, I don't think you need to. Well, no, I don't know if people talk about finding it, and it's not something that, I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah, Tom, you had something like 40-year-long relationship where you had that. But, Tom or Joseph, if one has embarked on the path of being a total slut, that's a different path. That's a different path than only having sex with a few people in your life and being able to refine all of those impulses into connection and intimacy. These are different paths. It's a big black bee. I wish he would go on camera. He was buzzing around the cable. Who knows? Again, there is also that idea of, this is again an idea that's been given to me many times, is that there are some people that are suitable for partnership, and there are some people that are more suitable for service. Again, like I said earlier in this talk, somebody describing me as a penis meant to go around and make love to the world or fuck the world. Make love to the earth and all the people in it. That's a very different manifestation than people who are meant to partner and refine something with another person. Refine or come to harmony. That is one thing that can happen with partners, right? You can just come to a harmony. Right. Yeah. Any questions for refining? It's interesting, Joseph, how you say you didn't have a lot of patience. I had a belief when I was younger that unconscious actions and utterances of people were more true than anything someone said on purpose. So I loved talking with all sorts of boring people to understand the truth of human life. Because these were people that didn't think that that's what they were doing. They were completely unconscious, or presented themselves as unconscious about anything existential. And yet they were teaching me existential truths about humanity and about passion and about desire and about sadness and about isolation, all sorts of truths I was learning. One of the things I often said was that I had sex with people just so I could skip the small talk and get right to their deepest, darkest truths and fears and desires. Countless times I would have sex with people or give massages to people and they'd say, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I feel like I've known you forever and I never say this kind of thing to anyone. So I think that's one of the reasons I was a slut. Again, I had this higher idea that I wanted to learn how to be a good lover. But I was also just really interested in the truths behind, I grew up in the Midwest and I had this perception that everybody lied about everything and kept everything hidden. And I thought that the only way to see the truth was to catch people off guard. And one of the best ways to catch people off guard was after they had orgasmed, right? A spy in the house of love, a thief with style. How do these lines go? What is spirituality? The world behind the world inside the world beyond the world, accessible through orgone, Willem Reich's idea of orgone, the orgasmic energy that animates the world, the emotional body, the water element that resonates between each person, and the magnetic fields of their hearts. While I've been doing this talk, a straight Mexican couple came up and they're on the other side of the wall from where I am and they're making out. So I just want you to know that there's authentic, pent-up, young sexual exploration happening right behind the screen. While we're watching the light fade over the Pacific Ocean in the sea that will grind your body against the rocks, where the vultures swirl and Neptune's semen is thick and frothy on the sea. Go on about what, Paul? Did I lose a thread? Is that enough? Have I done my duty for this evening? I bought a ticket to return to the United States today on the 23rd of May. I have a 12-hour layover in Miami on the way back to New York. I am free to change the ticket with no changing ticket fees. I got a job the first week of May helping Mantak Chia teach Qigong. The future's taking shape. The future's being born right here in this room. And all the death in my house makes it easy to shop online. Keep going where, Paul? I feel like I'm done. Am I not done? maybe I will listen to this again sometime and write it all down. If any of you are in the mood, you can transcribe this all and send me the copy. Anyway, thank you for your attention and your input. I've appreciated all your words and just the energy you've resonated that has driven this. Well, yes, that's of course the easy attractive heart, Brad, the idea of just resonating with the joy. But when Joseph said he doesn't have the patience to be a slut, it's because a lot of people, after you've had sex with them, they start complaining about their lives. There's this biological function in the brain that when you are horny, it disables most of your logic features, logic functions. And you just become very driven into the biological drive of procreation, recreation. But that as soon as you've ejaculated, all of the chemicals flush back into your head that wash that out, and then you're like, fuck, what am I doing? Oh my God, where am I? Why did I do this? Oh fuck, I've got to be home for dinner. My wife's waiting for me. Oh, God's gonna, the first guy that I had sex with when I was younger, I'm not gonna tell that story right now because he might still be watching. Right, no, I'm totally being like a high school kid right now. Connecting with that passion. What it's like to be a high schooler and be like, there's gotta be a greater truth to this boring, fucked up world. Otro mundo más allá. Otro mundo más allá. It does feel nice though, it's sticky. It's kind of hard to disconnect and just be like, oh, we're done. I should stop talking and just let you look at the sunset for a minute. It's getting too late, it's too soon. Yeah, the future's being born. Yeah, this first boyfriend I had when I was 21, he had, I believe, inherited this idea from his great love and given it to me. And we had this idea that we weren't just going to be boyfriends, we weren't just going to be partners, we were going to be members of a family of men. We were going to get like a farm, we were going to make our own foods, we were going to make crafts, make clothes, make music, and we were all going to have different relationships with each other. We didn't all need to have sex with each other, but we all needed to be like in this big, manly family of love. And that just sounded so much more attractive to me than just having a boyfriend, which I was terrified of because of my parents' relationship. They haven't had sex for 35 years, and I didn't want that. I really like, Alice, you should totally watch this talk from the beginning. You would love it. You would love it. But yeah, we had this idea that we would grow together as a family. There'd be older ones, younger ones, and there would be all these different relationships. And that was very attractive to me, but that's not happened. Although I have met a few people that have relationships like that. There's a guy I know in Jersey City who's originally from California, and his partner's originally from California, but his partner is much older than him, and over the years he got a boy, and then his husband got a bunch of slaves. And then as he stopped having sex with the boy and they just became like daddy and boy together, the husband kept going through all these different slaves. And now for the first time in his life, at the age of 56, he has his first same-sex or same-age lover. And he said that they're acting like teenagers together, smoking a lot of pot and listening to rock music from when they were kids. And I just think that's amazing that he's been with his primary relationship for something like 40-something years, and they still love each other. They haven't had sex in forever, but they still have all these dynamic sex and love dynamics, which I just think is amazing. No, nothing ever came close. And there's another guy that I met over a decade ago who at that time he had been with his husband for like 40 years. And then he had a boyfriend he'd been with for 20 years. And his husband had a boyfriend he'd been with for 19 years. And they had a whole cadre of slaves and boys. And some of them were even straight that he didn't have anything to do with sexually. He just made them do push-ups and taught him how to work for his company. And then he had this company that everybody kind of worked for. And he like made a lot of, he was kind of an S&M master, but like really in mind control, not like in leather or puppydom or something. And he would like force people to go to college and become, and have to get degrees and like being a nurse. Basically, he was populating his family, his world, with people who could help him when he got older. And he had houses all over America. And I was like, yeah, this is the relationship I always wanted. I'm glad it's possible. I don't think I can be a part of it. That's true. Yeah. The idea of, what you're saying there is interacting with people's greed. If you saw my talk last night about love and the different types of love, the few people I've been with who have demanded I be monogamous with them were just incredibly greedy and jealous and ugly about it. It was just really nasty. So there was nothing that made me want to be trapped in that relationship. Although I've certainly met people that have been, well, I personally have never met anybody who's actually happy in a monogamous relationship, but I have met people who are in monogamous relationships. They loved their husband like unequivocally, and they just understood that he only needed to have sex once or twice a year, but they needed to have sex more, and they also needed the rush of novelty of meeting somebody new and having the romance, even though it was just a season thing for them because they had their primary relationship, but they wanted somebody to fall in love with them and be in love with them for a period of time. And I did that when I was younger, but I don't do that anymore because I'm like, I'm not fucking wasting my heart on that shit right now, because I kept looking for some kind of actual relationship, not just entertaining some married man. But that's, there's lots of different ways that people can be happy and healthy in these kind of relationships. There you go. No? There you go. It's very tricky for people not to be greedy about the things they want, the things they enjoy. It's nice when we find they're not. Anyway, I think that's enough for tonight. I love you. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your generosity. I hope that some of what I've talked about has been useful for you. And I think the person who asked me to do this talk 3 years ago wasn't watching tonight, so I'll send a link to him. Oh, look. There's Venus and the sickle moon. You can kind of see it. That's the finger pointing to the moon. It's not the moon. And then Venus is like, how do I do this? How do I do this? There it is. That's Venus. Venus and the moon. Thank you guys. Love you. Have a nice night wherever you are. And I'll see you again soon.